As primary elections come and pass, the focus now shifts to the midterm elections in November.
WIFR's Bria Walters talks to experts and local leaders. She hears about how what's happening in the spring primary season will play out when voters head to the polls in November.
American people are fed up.
The midterms will go very well.
Candidates endorsed by President Donald Trump have performed quite well in primary elections, despite the fact that his approval rating is 34% and his disapproval rating is 64%, according to Pew Research Center.
There's a kind of inevitable weakening of a second-term president as he goes further and further into his second term.
Experts say a major shift is on the horizon. Trump-backed Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton scored an easy runoff victory Tuesday, defeating longtime incumbent Senator John Corwin. But Rockford University political science professor Bob Evans says it may not be as good as it sounds for the GOP.
This is going to be remembered as a victory with some problems for the president. Most, I believe almost all, of the Republican senators urged the president to endorse Cornyn. And so they're pretty disappointed.
For Congressman Darren LaHood, it means the Republican Party is strong.
You know, we're focused on affordability, on making sure that we're trying to bring down prices for the American people. I think that has to be a big issue.
On the other hand, LaHood's 16th district congressional opponent, Paul Nolly, says a Trump endorsement is not a badge of honor.
People, not just Democrats, not just independents, but Republicans coming onto our campaign because they're sick of this and they want a new option.
Evans says it's hard to know what will happen in the upcoming midterms, but party loyalty versus party majority will be tested.
Affordability is the generalized term. If the Republicans don't address those, then they will suffer big defeats.
In the state line, Bria Walters, WIFR News.
Well, President Trump has been very successful getting his candidates past the primary stage. According to Ballotpedia's latest data, Trump-endorsed candidates are 0-13 in special or general elections that have already been decided in 2026.